let me first introduce myself. My name is Geoffrey Trees. I'm sure a lot of you have seen me over the years do presentations. I've been going to the RadBug meeting now for almost 10 years. But I'm a technical manager in the product. I primarily work with the database and the user interface and more of the software, I guess, side of it. I know it's a software product, but it's a very large product. And we also have an engine team that does development. My primary focus is more on the front end and the database side of things. So I'm sure everyone has in the audience, even those who don't use it on a regular basis, have been exposed to Active Directory. Even if you don't know what it is, you've probably seen it. But I do want to go over it a little bit with everyone, just so everyone's on the same page and has an idea what we're talking about. I want to talk a little bit about the history of Active Directory and the product and what used to be there in the legacy and what's there in the modernized, because there is a difference. I want to talk about the motivation. Really, I put this on the presentation. I called it issue. I don't really know what to call it. I think more of a better term to use probably here would have been motivation. Like, what was the motivation for this enhancement? And then we'll talk about what's new in 7.1. You know, what is the change? And then we'll go through a real quick demo with SQL Server. I'm not going to get into Oracle, but we will demo it with SQL Server because, you know, doing a demo is a lot more, probably makes it a lot, people have the aha moment a lot easier than just doing a slideshow. So what is Active Directory? Well, an Active Directory, and that bottom right photo there kind of really gives a good example of what it is. It's a way for IT groups and to manage resources, and it's a Microsoft technology. There are, you know, other companies that have similar products, but Microsoft is probably like the dominant one, especially in most professional organizations that use Microsoft technology. You're using Active Directory. The primary way that you interface with it is your login. You know, when you log into your computer, you have a username and password that's given to you by your IT, and they can change your password, update it. They can lock you out. They can help you get logged back in if you lock yourself out. But Active Directory goes beyond that. You know, it also covers things like your email. It covers things like network storage and sharing, and pretty much anything that you can manage. Printers are included in there. It is just a way to make the battle of managing a large organization a little bit easier. So for BRDR, our primary interest is using it for authentication and authorization of users. Okay, so the legacy software used ODBC. I'm sure these screenshots here, those of you who have messed with this and set up BRDR on your local machine or just happen to use it, would probably recognize some of these screenshots here. ODBC and technologies like Microsoft COM and COM Plus, ECOM, and OLE or OLE, whatever people call it, these are older technologies. These are really the way to do it back in the 90s. Microsoft thought this is the future to make things generic. So, you know, you could use different programming languages, use different technologies, everything would work harmoniously together, and everything was going to be great. But then as people started using it, they found out that there really wasn't a silver bullet. It doesn't exist. And, you know, these things kind of came out with a lot of drawbacks. So for example, like ODBC, it tries to provide a way to make all database engines and all data technology speak the same language. And that sounds great, you know, but the problem is it really didn't work out that well. Even with ODBC, Oracle is different than SQL Server. And in our software, you know, specifically, we have to handle different things. We have to handle different cases for some of those. Now, I mean, ODBC does a better job than if everyone had their own technology, but it has some drawbacks. And because it was creating a maybe, I guess, a uniform way for everyone to talk, it tied a lot of hands. And so there was a lot of optimization and performance issues with ODBC. And so when we were designing the modernized system, one of the things that we wanted to do, just from, it's the way you do it nowadays, is to use native drivers. That was also guidance that was backed up by TNAA, the technical advisory group within Ashtraware, as well as just good industry practices. So ODBC in the legacy had a couple different ways of doing authentication. The primary way was database authentication, and I'm going to go through that here in a little bit more detail in a moment. So just to jump forward, the modernized software still supports SQL Server and Oracle, and I have a little note there, more options to come, hopefully. We sunset the use of ODBC in the modernized system, as I mentioned, and we implemented database connectivity with native, what they call native drivers, meaning that for SQL Server, we're using the SQL Server drivers. For Oracle, we're using the Oracle drivers. And I'm not even talking about the ODBC. I know there were still those respective drivers for ODBC, but these are the native drivers that those vendors provide for their products. So the legacy had a little secret, and this one has been a thorn in our side for many years, and that was that ODBC could be configured to use Windows authentication. And this goes back to the 90s, and I apologize, I didn't look this up, but I think one of the issues with ODBC was that back in the day, the Windows authentication wasn't an option. I think Microsoft added it in at some point. I don't think it was original to ODBC. And when the software was developed in the mid 90s, I think they started designing the software in 1995. This was the way to do it, and you only had database users. You could only log into your database using users that were created inside that database. But over the years, there was a lot of pressure on Microsoft, and they were always forward thinking. They added Active Directory and Windows authentication to their product. Oracle added external user authentication to their product, and the other vendors followed suit. And so ODBC had to adapt. So ODBC added Windows authentication. So what we discovered was a lot of our users, especially at the DOTs, started, I shouldn't say a lot, probably fewer than half, but a good portion of our user base started toggling that because it gave them a little secret, that they could do. They could log in with their network accounts. They didn't have to put a password in. And as you can imagine, that's not necessarily a good security model. The modernized system we don't support. As I mentioned, we don't support ODBC. So the result was anybody who's using this trick, and again, I'm calling it a trick because it wasn't something we necessarily supported, but it was not something we could easily, I guess, prohibit, was that anybody who's using that was now out of luck. And boy, I'll tell you, like we really figured out how to provoke a lot of people at the DOTs, like with that change, because we got a lot of people that were like, hey, where did that go? And I was like, well, you weren't supposed to do that to begin with. And they're like, we know, but we were using it. And so that was like swatting a beehive, I'll tell you. And I got stung a few times. This is where everyone would clap if we were in person right there for my silly joke. But what we did in 7.1 is very quickly the task force reacted to this. Several members on the task force were impacted by this, and also a lot of people who use the software pretty heavily were impacted by this. So many years ago, actually, we had a state that requested this enhancement to be put in the legacy, and I think around the time that was pitched, we were already into the modernization to some degree, and as been mentioned, the task force didn't want to, rightfully so, did not want to spend money on something that was going to be thrown away in a year or two. So this kind of got held back. This enhancement idea was held back, and it got implemented here in 7.1. So on the screen here, you can see this looks different. I mean, it looks different even from legacy. The username and password fields are grayed out, and again, I'll go over this. And then we've added a single checkbox there that says Windows authentication. Now I'm only showing the SQL Server option here, but Oracle works pretty much the same way. So what's new in 7.1? Well, now SQL Server, we still support SQL Server authentication. That's the way we've always done it, going all the way back to the 90s. We now support Windows authentication and Active Directory authentication. And the difference between those two, Windows authentication and Active Directory, is really just Windows authentication is if you have like a local workstation, like most of your personal laptops. If you have Windows on your personal laptop, you log in with your username and password. You're not logging into like a corporate directory. You're logging into your local user account, and that's called Windows authentication. And then Active Directory, again, is, as I mentioned, it's the IT provided or your organization's provided directory. And now the nice thing is, from an authentication standpoint, Windows handles both of these kind of like virtually for you. So it's transparent to you. You don't really even need to know that's going on in the background. For Oracle, we still support internal user authentication or schema authentication, I guess some people call it. And we have added support for external user authentication, and then also the Windows authentication in Active Directory. You know, as long as the Oracle server is configured to handle those, it works, and it's been tested. We've even had a few DOTs test that out, since Oracle is pretty predominant within the DOTs, various agencies. Okay, so what I want to do now is kind of do a really quick demo on here. And okay. So what I'm showing right now on my screen is 7.1. And hey, Ryan, if you're still up, are you able to see, I don't know if I was sharing the right screen or not. Are you able to see my BRDR login screen?
Yep, I can see the login.
Perfect, thank you. Okay, so this looks like it always has. You have your username, password, and then you have the connect to. And you know, you can still log in as you always have. Nothing has changed here. But let me log back out. And as I mentioned in the PowerPoint, we have added this Windows authentication. So let's see what this does. So what I've done is I've actually created another profile, and I just put WA for Windows authentication after it in here, another connection type. So we're just going to toggle to that. And you can see immediately it grays out the username and password field. It says right there, it's really light. You probably can't see it too well, but it says like desktop dash blah blah blah. It's a bunch of garbage. That's just the name of this computer, this virtual machine that I'm operating on that has Geoffrey, which is my username. And then the password field is disabled. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And you can see I'm able to log in. So now I am logged in as a different user as the bridge user. If you go into the configuration browser and you go to all users, what I have done is we have a mix in this example here. We have a mix of Windows authentication and native database users. So I originally logged in as the bridge user. Again, that's a native user. And then now I'm currently logged in as Geoffrey. So if you're going to add an Active Directory user or an Active Directory or Windows authentication, the pattern is basically the domain name or the computer name if it's Windows authentication, or your domain name if you're on Active Directory / and then your Active Directory or username. And that's all there is to it. And it would match whatever shows up on that screen when you first start up the application. It would be grayed out. That's the format that we follow. And that's the same format that like Microsoft recommends. I know there are other formats that are out in the wild. For example, with Azure Active Directory, a lot of times that you would use like Geoffrey at yourdomainname.com or something like that. But we're sticking with this. This is the standard one that comes directly from Windows. So that is the way it is. Now you may be wondering, hey, if that username and password is grayed out, what if you have a shared user, a shared system situation, or like a situation where you want to log on as someone else for whatever reason? You can absolutely do that. So what you can do is in Windows, if you hold down the Shift and Control key and you right click on the icon, it says run as a different user. So on this computer, I have created another user called JDoe. And this would be authenticated against your Windows authentication or Active Directory fabric. So I'm gonna go ahead and click OK. And then it starts up, and now John Doe is there. So I'm going to go ahead and click OK. And there we go. So it works just the same. So what's really nice is this is considered what they call a mixed mode, meaning that we have native database users, and also we have SQL Server authenticate. We have Active Directory and Windows authentication users. So what this looks like in the database, let's hop over here. What this looks like is on the database server itself, under your logins, you just need to make sure that you've added the Active Directory user. So I have Geoffrey in here, and then I have JDoe here. Okay, and then I still map this and I'm getting into the weeds here a little bit, but I do want to show it for those of you who are interested. It's still, you still have to map it to the database that you want and also provide the Vertus user read-only role or whatever name. You can rename the roles. Some states rename the roles. You can use that as well. Another option you can take now is you can add actual Active Directory groups to your database, and then you can assign the group itself privileges on your database. So for example, let's say you have a bridge group, and whenever you onboard someone into your department or they become a new employee or whatever, you have an IT policy that they add them to a certain Active Directory group. What you can do is you can just add that Active Directory group here once. You can put a ticket with your IT, say, hey, assign this Active Directory group these privileges to this database. And they can do that. And let's say you have 100 people in that group. You basically gave all 100 people now have that first step they need to be able to connect to the database. If they're not in the configuration browser, as I showed here, they still won't be able to get in. They still will not be able to get into the system. They will not have right privileges. They won't be able to get in. They would have to be here to be able to do that. And you can even tighten those restrictions down a little bit as well. But by doing that, then once you add that Active Directory group, whoever administers your BRDR instance or database, now all they have to do is go in here and just add and remove users. You no longer have to reach out to your IT and say, hey, can you add another user to the database? Whether it's whether you're using SQL Server authentication or you're using the Windows Authentication Active Directory, you no longer need to do that if you use a group. So you can just do it once and then just manage everything through the user interface, and that should greatly reduce the headaches that are involved. And again, like I said, not everyone that's in that group has to be in here, so it still is secure. They will have the ability to do read operations on the database if they have the tools to do so. But again, they won't be able to write to the database. So that's very important. One thing that was out of scope of this enhancement, I do want to kind of just make a little sidebar, is something called Azure Active Directory, and that's the up and coming thing, and it actually got pretty predominant with the pandemic because everyone started working from home. And Azure Active Directory is a technology that's similar to Active Directory that serves similar purposes, user authentication and whatnot, but it's managed by Microsoft and it's hosted by Microsoft. That was not technically in scope of this enhancement. However, off the record, it should just work. You can add Active Directory, Azure Active Directory logins right in here. If this computer was attached to an Azure Active Directory, you could add those users directly in here, and it should just work. Now that said, we have not exhaustively tested it. The goal of this enhancement was really just to get it working for Oracle and SQL Server and really do a deep dive, make sure it is working correctly. But that said, if you want to use Azure Active Directory, give it a shot. I think it'll probably work fine for you. And just please let us know. And if you have any questions on any of these things or getting it set up, it's really quite simple. But if you're new to this or if your IT is unsure and they want to just double check, please reach out to us and we'll be glad to do just have a phone call or whatever just to help you go through a few steps.